We are going to continue, and chronologically now you're emancipated. You had a volatile relationship with your father, but you continued through your whole adult life until he died. You continued to want to have a relationship and to have some kind of a relationship for most of that time.
Yes.
Why did you fight so hard to have a relationship with someone that at many times was a very negative influence in your life?
You know, I think because my father is always going to be my father, and I think it was important to me to show him that I would be a strong woman in this world. I could be, and I could handle myself independently, and I wanted him to know that, you know, there were a lot of good things that he did teach me, and the strength and the determination and his sheer will to survive in a country when they had nothing. There are a lot of good things that he did teach me. He had a strong will, and I have a strong will. And sometimes, you know, things that he did may not be acceptable in America, but the things that he did were very acceptable back in Romania. So this is all he knew. This is all he grew up knowing. And when I understood more of his culture and his background and why maybe he did things in a very different way than I would do things with my children, I started to have more compassion and forgiveness, because I have one father in this world. And if you don't learn to forgive and you don't learn to move forward with your life, they're going to be gone one day. And you're always going to want that relationship to be, you know, healed in some way. And that's why I always fought so hard to have a relationship with him. But because we're both strong-willed, and I wanted him to see my vantage points, and I tried to understand his, sometimes he didn't always want to budge and didn't want to understand my side. But at the same time, I don't just give up on the person because of that. I continue to strive to have a relationship because it's the right thing to do. And in my heart, I just needed a little separation. So at 17, I didn't speak to him for 6 months. But then I knew that it was important to, you know,
some kind of relationship.
Yes.
Before we continue with your life, let's just go back to gymnastics for just a couple questions. Most of us are never going to, you know, mount a balance beam or uneven parallel bars, that's for sure. It appears to us that you defy gravity when you do these things. What do you consider, out of the different challenges, what do you consider the most difficult? Is it the beam? Is it the freestyle? You know, what's the most difficult?
I think the one that gives the most challenge mentally is the balance beam, because it's 4 inches wide, and it takes an incredible amount of nerves of steel to be calm under pressure and performing and flipping and twisting in a minute and 30, second balance beam routine. So that is the biggest, I would say, biggest challenge.
Is the mount or the dismount, or what's in between? What's the most difficult?
Mounts not always is most difficult. It depends on the level of difficulty of how each gymnast opts to mount the beam. So they can choose an easy mount, so it depends on the value of difficulty with each athlete. And the same goes for the dismount. Some people throw a really hard dismount where at the end of the routine it can make or break your routine. But if you land that difficult dismount, it could be great. So it's really from the moment you mount the beam to the end. I mean, it is everything even in between, because any slight error, any slight lopsidedness, and you fall off, it's definitely not the goal. And so you want to hit the best routine of your life every time you get up there, and that's what you train for. You train for that perfection day in and day out, and the balance beam just takes an incredible amount of mental strength.
Now, do you or you and a coach decide what you're best at? You're coming up through the ranks, and perhaps you like several different ways to compete. Who decides? Do you just pick one, or do you go for more?
Each individual athlete and their coach have a different relationship. When you're younger, the coach decides more of the layout of your routines, then they decide more what you should do in the routine. They compose the routine more for you. I think when you get older, you have a little more say, depending on, again, your relationship with your coach. Some coaches are very domineering and they want to control all the aspects and not let some of the athletes choose too much. Some coaches are really great. They interact, and I think that's the best relationship to have, is when you get the input of the athlete, because they know and they feel their bodies too. So they know what they can do well, and the coach has a different perspective to add to the scenario.
One last question about gymnastics before we go to your adult life. I showed I showed horses for years and years, and I was the only child that showed horses. And so, there were many times when I felt guilty about the sacrifices that my family made, although they chose to make them, and all of it going into one child and all that goes with that. But, how did you cope with, feeling that, your family was sacrificing so much for you to get the coaching and to be able to go to the gymnastics and compete? How did you deal with that as a child?
Well, as a child, I knew my parents and my family, my sister, Christina, we all were in it together. It was as if everybody was going for this goal and dream. And I think when you have a child going for the Olympics, it is a sacrifice for the entire family. There are competitions you have to go to. There are sacrifices financially. There are, monthly tuition. There's competitions, leotards, and all those things that add up very quickly. But my sister, I always remember her just saying how, she was proud of me, and we've talked about it in our adult life as well.
Now, that's one sister.
Yes.
You find out as an adult, pregnant, almost finished with college, and you get a letter in the mail telling you that you have a sister.
Yes, the biggest shock of my life. That letter turned my world upside down.
I'm sure you've asked yourself 100 times. You were 6 when she was born.
Yep.
I'm sure you've asked yourself 100 times if you remember seeing your mother pregnant.
Right, I have.
And what's your answer?
From a physiological standpoint, Jennifer was not very big in my mother's tummy. So it wasn't as if, we had talked about, preparing the children and, okay, we're going to have another child. It wasn't like that in my family. They didn't do bridal shower or baby showers and even bridal showers. They just didn't do things in the Western world that we consider, normal. We didn't have that kind of upbringing. And the only way I can explain it is, again, the fact that my parents didn't talk about those kinds of things to me, and part of maybe the Eastern European mentality and culture. They didn't explain that, hey, we're having another child on the way, and the stressful home life that I was in, being immersed in my gymnastics,
yes.
And just all of those things, I think, made a difference. And when I look back, all there was just a little bit of weight gain, and nobody really talked about it.
That.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your sister was born without legs.
Right.
And she was adopted by a family, and she had what appears to be a wonderful life.
Yes.
A question that I have is, she's born without legs and certainly presents more challenges than we can imagine. But did you ever say to yourself, she got a loving home and I got a lot of challenges in my home? Did you ever think like that?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to Jennifer about it, and Christina as well, my youngest sister. And Jennifer is like, I had a great family, a great upbringing. I had the best childhood ever. And I said, I'm so happy for you, because that was one of the first things that when I found out the news, I wanted to know. I said, God, please, I hope that she had a good upbringing, because it would be very hard for her to have an open heart and not be resentful toward our family if she didn't have that. So God placed her, we believe, in the right family.
Sounds like it.
And she had the best upbringing. And I think the reason that maybe I had the challenges and adversities so that I could grow into the person that I am today. And those things helped shape me as a human being. Those challenges, we all have them in life.
Yes.
And you can choose to make them work for you or against you. And I've realized that all of these things in my life happened to me, or not to me, but for me, excuse me. So they all happened for me to learn a lesson, to grow from them, to become a stronger individual, and to use all of those life experiences to help maybe another generation, or to help change my view of how I would parent. So I really believe all of them were lessons for me.